Alrighty, let's get started. Yeah, so welcome to day two to the Mountain Plains Bringing the Farm to School Regional Facilitators Workshop. We hope you enjoyed the day yesterday and are looking forward to diving deeper into the trainer's toolkit over the next 3 days. As we start off day two together, we want to just remind and encourage folks to turn on your cameras if you're able to. And while we ask you to stay muted, if you're not speaking, please feel free to come off mute to ask any kind of questions or share any kind of feedback or any kind of thoughts that you have at the time. So thanks again for sharing these next few days with us. And we're going to start off with the day just with just a little quick activity. I wanted to just get a sense of how you all are receiving the information so far at our beginning of day two. And really wanted to ask, what are you most interested in learning today and discussing further with your team? So if you're able to, feel free to come off mute and share your thoughts or use the chat and share and answer that. So yeah, just what are you interested in learning about today or discussing with your team further today? Do you have any questions lingering from yesterday? Anything that excites you based off what our agenda is for today?
Well, Thomas, this is Deb Eggman from North Dakota. We are kind of struggling about if a 2-day sit-down training is an awful lot for producers. And thinking about if there's ways we can shorten it up and maybe have all the resources and things available electronically to either send ahead of time or whatever. It just seems like it's really a lot. And we have a big state, so we would preferably like to do it maybe in 4 locations, but that's a big task to do 2 days in 4 spots. So that's what we're kind of struggling with a little bit. I mean, that's our deal to worry about, but even us sitting 4 hours is a long time.
Yeah, certainly. And thanks for bringing it up. And that's certainly one thing that you can really utilize your breakout sessions to strategize with your team members about how best to really conduct these trainings in a way that makes sense for all the producers and their availability in different areas of your state. So we'll be covering just in deeper details some of the different sorts of approaches to administering this training and taking a look at how this training can be attached to other producer-focused events, or really looking at how other states that have gone through this training in the past are approaching the local producer trainings through kind of a hybrid format, partly online, partly in person, and other sorts of methods like that. So yeah, thanks for sharing. And that's certainly something that we want to dig in deeper with the whole group. I'm seeing some great ideas and thoughts in the chat. Thank you everyone for contributing there. Excellent. Yeah, so as always, feel free to share your thoughts in the chat. We'll have plenty of time for us to give some questions and answers to you all. So if you have a question that hasn't been answered yet, don't worry, we'll be able to get to those in the future. So moving on. So day 2 overviews. Before we get started, this is just a reminder that your participant home base is a document that has all the links that you'll need to follow along with us, including links to the Jamboards, links to the website, and links to the digital versions of the trainer's toolkit, as well as the workshop agenda for the week. And if you have any trouble keeping along, just know that you can go back to the participant home base to get caught up. You can also ask us in the chat where we're at based off of our presentation slides at the moment, and we can get you back on track. So there's a lot of information with a lot of different sort of domains here. So no worries if it gets a little mixed up. And today we'll be focusing on a deeper dive into the producer curriculum, specifically the introduction, modules 1 and 2. So throughout the day, you'll have the opportunity to work with your state breakout teams to explore ideas in curriculum building, as well as thinking forward to the local producer trainings. And we'd like to remind you that the implementation of the training may look different from state to state and training to training. So as we just talked about, and as we talked about yesterday, these trainings may come in the form of a standalone training. It may be just simply a kind of a collage of pieces of this workshop that are going to be used to enhance another producer event. So there are an endless amount of variations that you can use to approach those local producer trainings. And that's by design. We want this to be as flexible and adaptive as possible. So the module overviews. Before we review each module, I'd like to just orient you to how we'll be approaching the module overview. For each producer curriculum module, we'll be walking through the content section by section, in some cases slide by slide, to familiarize you all with the content of the modules and to help you envision and plan for presenting the curriculum material yourself. So we encourage you to follow along in both your facilitator's guide and the producer workbook, and we'll give you page references throughout to help you follow along and stay on track, just as the example is seen here. So as we move through the modules, we'll point out activities and opportunities for local customization and facilitator tips for you to think about when you present to producers. So I'm going to actually turn it over to Tammy at this point to get us started with the producer curriculum overview.
Okay. Hey, folks. Great to see you all here today. And yeah, we're going to just start out with this sort of high level overview, what we call the training module outlines or curriculum maps. And they are in the facilitator guide if you want to follow along on page 11. So I'm also going to turn there with you. And I'll just give you a moment to navigate there, as I also navigate there myself. And producers have a slightly different version of the module outlines in the producer workbook to help them navigate these modules too. So you all saw this yesterday in the producer workbook overview I gave. And these outlines are generally, well, they are located on the first page of each module in the producer workbook, and we'll look at some of those samples in a moment. So let's take a look at the components of the training module outlines. And here is we're using module 1 as our poster child. So you can get there by going to page 12 of the facilitator guide. And in each training module outline, you'll see these sections. So there's the training topic and duration. And so that lists each section. They're divided in like a typical outline format, ABC. And that lists each section of the module, as well as the estimated time that you can plan on using those for your training agenda. And as I didn't quite hear who was talking from North Dakota, but yeah, this might also give you an idea to figure out how to pick and choose which training modules might work with your producer audience, as well as understanding how to get your training organized for producers. And then this next column is the learning objectives. And each section has a learning objective, and basically it's what we're hoping producers will know or be able to do following that particular section. And then the content and core concepts, basically just an outline of the content that you're going to find in each section of the module. And finally, this last column here is the training activities and materials that you can first orient producers towards, as well as help orient yourself. So this includes the slide decks and where they are in the slide deck, and then a lot of the materials that you'll be using for activities throughout that particular module, including case studies and worksheets. So that's kind of that high level overview. And so here's the corresponding producer version of the curriculum outline that's in the producer workbook. And that includes only what the producer might need to navigate to use that module. So we tried to keep a lot of those real detailed pieces that you see in your facilitator guide out just to simplify things. But we do, as you can see, we do want the producers to understand what we're hoping they're going to get out of that particular module, as well as the content, or basically that can almost be more of a table of contents, and then the learning materials that they can utilize as they go through that particular module on the right there. So each presenter over the next couple of days, and I am gonna just warn you that it's just Tomas and I today, but you'll have some variation over tomorrow. But we had one of our presenters call in sick, and so you get to hear less from myself and Tomas today. But we're going to be going through the in depth over today and tomorrow. But just to help orient you to the flow of the training, I'm just going to briefly go over each training module outline, and then I encourage you to also follow along on pages 11 through 17 of your facilitator guide. So as I said, module 1's our poster child. So you've been using this as an example all along, but let's just dig in a little bit more to module 1, which is titled Getting to Know School Markets. And it's really all about the child nutrition programs and the basics of procurement. And since this is one of the topics that many of you are probably familiar with, as a lot of folks in the state agencies are kind of working on that procurement side, this is an area that producers actually aren't very familiar with. So we designed it to be more interactive and just really providing a very basic introduction to those child nutrition programs that producers might be selling through. And then there's lots of applied activities in this module to really get producers thinking about how their products might fit into that child nutrition program. And Tomas is going to go over this in just a bit, so I'm not going to spend too much time on that. Module 2, which we'll also be talking about in more detail later on today, is all about market channels, or those pathways that producers can utilize to sell their products to schools. And there are 2 sections that you can see here. And section A really just takes some time to introduce those channels. And there's loads and loads of resources on that particular topic already. So we encourage trainers not to spend as much time on that, and maybe refer producers to some of the other amazing resources that are out there on different market channels. And then section B really starts to dig into the topic of selling directly to schools and exploring school solicitations. And there is, as you can see here on the section B, training activities and materials, there are a lot of materials there. And one of the key resources here is a solicitation packet. And it's kind of huge because we actually have a sample of a bid from, I believe, 1 or 2 different school districts. And so we have that listed in the appendices, but there's lots of worksheets, and we'll be talking more about that later on this afternoon. So something to take note of as you're thinking about this particular module in the training. So module 3 helps producers. We're trying to get them to narrow down the types of products that would work really well with school sales, and really starting to think about the capabilities of the school district and how to match that product, and perhaps the need for any kind of processing that corresponds with the capabilities of the school district. So that's what module 3 is all about. And we'll be hearing, you all will be hearing more about that tomorrow with my colleague Margot Hale from Arkansas. And module 4 is a doozy. So it includes details about determining price point through record keeping tools, how or whether or not to scale up for school sales, production planning for both crops and livestock, as well as food safety. And as you can see, there are lots of components to module 4. And so there's like 2 pages of outlines, just 2 pages of outlines. And it is one of the longest modules because, one, it addresses multiple enterprises, and it really digs into some of those challenges that Carol and Dimitri was talking about yesterday. And so one of the things, again, kind of going back to some of the things that, or the questions that were posed about this module, or about customizing content. This module could be, and I would, sorry, my dogs are saying hello, as standalone content for picking and choosing that content based on, one, the type of producers, or just if you can just use this as a half-day training. So there's lots of ways to customize this particular module, in addition to the others, but this might work really well as a standalone. So that's kind of it for just those training outlines, but we really want you to think of these as a helpful tool for you to continue to come back to throughout the workshop, and as you're starting to plan your trainings after the workshop. So we encourage you to look at these. These are like the detailed outlines, and we encourage you to look at them first as you start planning your trainings and determining how to actually structure those producer trainings in the breakout sessions that you're going to be doing later on over the course of the next couple of days. And keep in mind, our review of these outlines, again, is just an overview of these resources, and we're really going to start digging into the modules today and over today and tomorrow. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and see if there's any questions about the outlines at this point.
Can I ask a question verbally?
Oh, we definitely want you to be asking questions verbally.
Taking me a minute to find the chat. Would it work to do like 2 different trainings for 2 slightly different audiences? For example, an introductory workshop using module 1 for farmer to introduce the idea of farm to school for farmers who are just beginning to think about it, and then a separate training for those that are ready to do it, that delves more into modules 2 and 3 and 4, the nitty gritty of how to do it. Is that?
Yeah, actually, Stephanie, that's such a great point, because I think I will say initially, as we started to develop this curriculum, we had intended it for it to be 1.5 to 2 days, but it's so interesting to watch as states start to develop and adapt these materials for their own purposes in the states. And that's one of the ways that states have been approaching this curriculum, is kind of doing that introduction, which I'm going to go over next, as well as module 1 in one training, and then kind of, filtering out producers that start to get really serious about things, and then have them really start to dig into modules even parts of module 2 could be used that way too, because we're introducing folks to those marketing channels. So that might be another one to like section A. But again, you're welcome to. We develop these materials, but I think they can be adapted. And our the states that we first started training way off in April are starting now to actually implement the training. So we'll have a better idea of how well they're either working together or separately, hopefully by the end of the year.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for the suggestion too. Other states might want to take that approach as well. Any other comments?
I just want to add one little thing. While I want to counterbalance the intention to maybe strip out some of the content, because I do want us to remember that this team did a whole process of a scan of the needs of agricultural producers that we heard summarized yesterday. And this is the stuff that farmers said they need. And while it's always a balance of how much time can we ask of producers to do the training, I just want us to remember that this team spent over a year really curating this material. And it's not just helpful for farm to school. The approach that is being shared in this training is a helpful approach for farmers to consider new markets, whether they're institutional markets, whether they're grocery markets, whether there's a farmer's market. And so, going through this training, it's not like they're going to be getting nothing out of it if they're not selling to a school as soon as they end. So I just want to put in a plug for that. I'm really excited and curious to see where all of your states take and adapt this. But please do remember that this is an extremely deliberate suite of training materials. And just consider that if you do want to kind of, remove some of the content.
Yeah, thanks for making that point, Andrea. And I would say that the only places we do encourage actually removing the content is like if it's not really relevant. So there is this whole section in module 4 about working with livestock producers and livestock production planning. So obviously that probably wouldn't be great with an audience full of, predominant like crop producers. But yeah, so but definitely based on, time constraints. And I think Tomas talked about this yesterday too. It's just how can you do like a series of weekly trainings or just do kind of like this 2-day intensive, or that's where I think the flexibility comes in. So yeah, but thanks, Andrea. All right. And then Stephanie's wanting to know if any states are partnering with beginning farmer training programs to teach these materials. And so far we haven't heard of that, mainly because we do worry about beginning farmers accessing or kind of jumping right into kind of what I would say a higher risk in terms of marketing channel, but those beginning producers, the definition according to the beginning farmer rancher development program is producers under 10 years. So, I know plenty of producers in their fifth to 10th year of production that are entering into wholesale. So yeah.
I saw some, I can see some potential overlap with our Farm Beginnings curriculum that we offer, but exactly, I was wondering exactly about what you said. This is more advanced marketing and pricing. So yeah.
Where are you located, Stephanie?
North Dakota, I am with
Oh, okay.
Farm with 2 R's, and we're part of the
Oh, right.
Farm Beginnings
Okay.
Collaborative. So-
Okay, I'd heard that was going on in Minnesota, so that makes sense. Cool, awesome. Okay, well, thanks for your comments, everybody, and please respond in the chat to Stephanie's questions. Okay, so you get to hear from me a little bit more. I'm going to talk about the introduction now, and so I'm going to share my screen again. All right, and hopefully you all are seeing that. Okay, so now we're going to really jump into that curriculum. We spent some time going through those outlines, and we're going to spend about the next 30 minutes or so walking through the content found in the introduction module in both the facilitator guide and the producer workbook. So we'll be going back and forth between those 2 resources, and also following along with the slides that are visible as thumbnails in the facilitator guide, as we talked about yesterday. And I will also be referencing where, as Tomas mentioned earlier, where we are in each resource by including some visual cues like the slide image that you see right here, as well as page numbers and references throughout. So we do jump back and forth between the facilitator guide and the producer workbook a lot. So if you feel like you're lost or you need something repeated, just let me know or put it in the chat and we'll get you where you need to be. So this image here on the top right corner that you see is the first slide of the curriculum. And it's the first slide of the introduction slide deck that you all can find both at in the facilitator section of the website. And if you're looking at the facilitator guide online, it's an embedded link. But you can see the matching thumbnail of this slide on page 19 of the facilitator guide. So I'm going to get started with that section right there. So if y'all want to turn to that page, that'd be great. Okay, so let's make sure we're on the same, we're all in the same place. So that outline for the introduction is on page 18 of the facilitator guide. And then we encourage that you all have both the prompt for the facilitator guide on page 18 and then the producer workbook on page 2 in front of you so you can follow along. And there will be some little quizzes coming up for you all to get some points for your state teams. So in the facilitator guide, each module includes an about section followed by the module and curriculum outline that you see here. And so it's basically a smaller version of the full page versions that we were just going over. So some of you, like me, who are I'm in my middle age and I need to use glasses to look at this one. So it might be easier just to look at the one in the first section of the facilitator guide. And basically, this info is intended to be a snapshot of what you'll find in the module for planning purposes. And for, in contrast, the producers will see just a more streamlined version of this and basically just the curriculum outline and content, as well as some of those key resources. So again, here's that larger, if you turn to page 18 of the facilitator guide, that's that simplified version, and the simplified version on page 2. Not really anything new here since I just covered that. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on that. And then if you can, but I do want to point out some of the content in the introduction. So I'll just stay on this slide for a few seconds. Really we want to be introducing farm to school to producers in the introduction, and setting the stage for understanding both the demand for local food and school meals, as well as the benefits for producers to sell to schools. And a big part of the introduction is really providing an opportunity for seasoned producers to share their success stories. This might be a place where you do some kind of like Q&A or a panel or something like that. And we'll talk about this more later, but on how to like customize the content and find local producers in your state. And this module also introduces the concept of how producers can actually use goal setting and through an action planning template to support their efforts in selling to schools. And the materials that we'll be looking at later on are the action planning guide, which is on page 52. And you can see that here listed here on this outline. And we estimate, you can see here, we estimate like 30 to 45 minutes for the introduction. And that doesn't include this pre-evaluation section that I'll be talking about shortly, because we want to spend some time having producers just setting the stage with a panel or some Q&A with successful producers selling to schools. So under the curriculum outline, you can see some of the tools and background information that you might need as a facilitator. So those core concepts are listed, they're listed first, and those are, that's basically a refresher for any kind of core concept that you might need to understand for that module. But they're located in several different sections of the facilitator guide. And then we have this digging deeper into core concepts that is listed just below. And it's basically a short list of resources to support you in preparing for delivering this content. And can people give me a thumbs up just to make sure that you're you're digging into those resources right now? You're seeing where we're at? Okay, I'm seeing thumbs up. Awesome. Okay. So another thing that I want to point out about this section is that these are embedded links in the online version of the facilitator toolkit. And it's also listed in Appendix A. So we've got them in a few different places. And that Appendix A is in the facilitator guide on 108, but it's basically the same list of resources. And then this background section is also where you'll find, so if you turn to page 19, you'll also see, again, if you're looking at the facilitator guide online, you'll see the opportunity to download the slide deck right there. You can see a visual of that on your screen. And then the slide deck files are also in that facilitator section of our website. And maybe Tomas could just go ahead and paste a link to the facilitator section of the Bringing the Farm to School website. And then finally, you can see a list of case studies that really apply to this particular module. And that's the same with all of the modules going through the entire curriculum. So we have those case studies listed here just so you can get a quick glance. And this particular case study is a conversation between a buyer from the Natoma School District in California and a small 2-acre producer, Fiery Ginger Farm, who sells primarily to that school district, sharing their perspectives on the importance of building and maintaining relationships when it comes to farm to school. And again, those case studies can be accessed in the facilitator section of the website. So you'll also notice each slide in the facilitator guide has those talking points for you. So as we go through these modules today and tomorrow, we'll be pulling from those talking points and summarizing where necessary. Well, we won't be reading those talking points verbatim. We're going to spare you that. But we do encourage folks to read through each module's talking points before delivering the training. And as a reminder, you can make necessary adjustments to your slides you can download those slides and then actually make those adjustments to the talking points and any kind of regionalization content. And then finally, this key terms, we'll dig into that here next, but those are, for you to create a shared language with producers. And as you'll notice, as we start to get into modules 1 through 4, there's actually going to be a Jeopardy game option that Tomas and I are going to sample today and give you an opportunity to get some team points. And Tomas will introduce that to you in module 1. And a full list of key terms and acronyms, which I found this program is rife with acronyms, is on page 105 of the facilitator guide, but it's also on page 62 of the producer workbook. So let's just pause and take a moment to navigate to those sections and those resources. So turn to page 105 of your, I don't know if you can see that, there you go, of your facilitator guide, and page 62 of your producer workbook. Okay, so I would like for somebody to come off mute and tell me what the definition of whole farm goal setting in the facilitator guide glossary is. So can somebody find the definition and come off mute?
I can tell you.
All right, Barb.
It is distinct from other farm planning approaches because it ties together all of the planning producers do for the whole farm. This holistic approach is based on the short and long-term vision producers and their families have for themselves and the farm.
Great, thank you, Barb. So we got a point, and remind everybody what your state is so we can get you a point.
Sorry, I'm in Kansas.
Right, okay. Okay, so let's find in the producer workbook, can somebody look up the definition of school markets? And come off
that. I know.
All right, Leanne.
School
Was
market.
it Leanne or who was first, Leanne or Margaret?
Whichever.
All right, Leanne, let's hear from you. I didn't see who went off mute first.
The market pathway in which child nutrition programs are the end consumer.
All right. Point for Wyoming. All right, so that is an overview of what you'll find. I just wanted to share what you'll find at the beginning of each module in the facilitator guide and the producer workbook as well. And also what is specifically in the introduction. So I'm going to start really digging into the introduction here. Any questions though before I start moving in? All right. Okay, everybody take a few moments to get back to page 19 of your facilitator guide. So this is the very first slide that folks will see after that title slide that I just shared. And it's really meant to contextualize the local producer training that you'll be hosting in your state. And so in other words, we want to answer the question, why am I here for producers? And so this discusses like the overall objectives for the training as for the entire training. So, you know, we want producers to increase their knowledge for and understanding of farm to school, and then also, of course, increase participation in farm to school activities. And then ultimately, we want to increase the amount of local foods that producers sell to schools. And then there are more specific learning objectives embedded in each module that you all will share with your producers, but this is just kind of setting the stage for producers to understand, why are we here? And what do we want to get out of this? So moving on to slides 3 and 4, and this is really just a prompt for you to take some time before you get into the training to do a pre-evaluation. And we'll be, actually Lydia Oberholzer from New York University will be talking more about this on Thursday. But I did want to point out that since you are hosting a training, we want you to just spend a little bit of time sharing this pre-training survey for producers. It might be something you would hand out right as they're walking in the door, or be included in their training materials. And then you'll also prompt producers post-training to fill out a survey during the conclusion. And I'll talk a little bit about that tomorrow, a little bit more about that tomorrow. And you do have additional guidance about the evaluations in Appendix D. And like I said, that this is nothing to spend a bunch of time worrying about, but we'll be talking about this more on Thursday. So following along in the facilitator guide on page 20, you'll see the learning objectives for the introduction are to just, again, help producers understand what farm to school is and how it can benefit them, and identify their motivations for selling to schools, and really understanding how their farm goals align with those motivations and values. And then finally, introducing that concept of goal setting and how to do some action planning as a tool for meeting their producers' own farm and lifestyle goals through selling to schools. And these are captured in slide 5. But they're also listed in that simplified curriculum outline for producers in their workbook. So they see that on page 2. So the first activity you'll be doing with producers is an icebreaker. And before I explain this activity as it's outlined or suggested, I want folks to take a moment to think of an icebreaker that they like to use, especially when working with producers. And then I'd like for you to share those shortly. But the way the icebreaker that we suggest here, and again, it's only a suggestion, we recommend that you provide producers with an index card and have them write down these answers to the icebreaker questions. Just give them a little bit of time to think about their answers on their own first. And then just depending on the size of the group, you can have a few folks share back, or you can have them break into smaller groups to share the answers that they've outlined. And there's a lot of different ways that this could look, but we want to make sure that producers are connecting one with each other and early on in the training, and they're also starting to think about why they are here and why farm to school is a marketing channel. And we recommend actually collecting those index cards and reviewing them when you have a moment earlier on in the training, like if there's a break or during the panel or something like that, to make sure that you can review those and weave in answers to their questions throughout, and make sure you are meeting their expectations and goals as best as you can. So I want to hear about some of the icebreakers that you folks have used during the training. So feel free to include that in the chat, or also feel free to go off mute. So Lillian, what's something you raise because it's fun or makes you happy? That's a great question, Lillian. Yeah, I like that. What is your favorite season and why? Fanny, thank you. Favorite recipes and products? Great. What was your favorite school lunch? Yes, and we actually have an activity about that in a little bit. Brittany suggests asking individuals in a group to find something that they all have in common, which is a great way to build trust and sharing later on. Yeah, that's a great idea, Brittany. Okay. Thanks. Those are all great ideas. Oh, I saw one more and I just lost it. Here. Networking bingo. Yes, we've used that before too. That is I saw that, I got that idea at a marketing summit as well. Aubrey. Ag education activity in elementary school. Yeah. Having producers go way back. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing. Keep them coming. Okay, so that first content area where we really start to dig into this is on slide 7 and page 3 of the producer workbook. So slides 8 through 10 in the facilitator guide and page 3 of the workbook begin with defining what the core elements of farm to school are based on the way we've designed this curriculum. So that includes procurement of local food, education, and school gardens. And we want producers to have a general sense about these 3 aspects of farm to school and where they can potentially plug in outside of just that local procurement, if they're interested and able, and to emphasize that the benefits of farm to school can be amplified when these 3 elements are actually working together and reinforcing those impacts. And as described in the talking points on the top of page 21 of the facilitator guide, we want farmers to know that farm to school is unique in every community, and that the training you plan has been designed and customized with their specific needs and offerings or products in mind. And then slide 9, we want producers to start thinking about how their goals may align. We start getting into that goal setting piece, how their goals align with selling to schools, and to see that school districts are actually interested in purchasing and serving local food for a variety of reasons. So this includes supporting local farmers and businesses, increasing meal quality and overall school meal program participation, like we heard about with Brian yesterday, and how he was talking about he just hated seeing all the stuff thrown away. So that was, an opportunity to see why he's accessing bison for school meals. And then increasing school kids' willingness to try new things like fruits, vegetables, and proteins. And then supporting school wellness policies and as well as broader school board priorities. So those are some of the motivations from the school district side, which can help producers identify their own motivations for selling to schools and to see schools actually as partners. we keep talking about that relationship building piece. So it really helps to see the perspective from the school side. And then lastly, on slide 10, slide 10 illustrates the ways in which schools may partner with local farms and food businesses and give producers a sense of the variety of ways that they can engage in schools and also those interconnected benefits. So, for example, participating in a special school event or hosting a taste testing can actually result in increasing sales from not only the school district, but also families and community members. So there's actually a list of those under the talking points on slide 10 that you can see and you can share with the group. So at this point, we're going to do a poll and beyond procurement, what are the 3 most common partnerships between schools and farmers that you'd highlight for your state? And so Carlos is going to launch the poll, and any partnerships that you don't see listed, just please add them to the chat. Okay, starting to get some answers in there. Getting some folks adding to the chat. Oh, and Andrea did point out, that if you're a state leader and you're doing some facilitation, you're going to need to add some of your answers to the chat. All right. So we have rising to the top are local producer highlights in school menus and educational events like Farmer in the Classroom. And then a close second here is cafeteria promotion campaigns, or close third, I should say, cafeteria promotion campaigns like tasting activities, as well as farm tours. And then we have a few others like highlighting farm to ECE and successful way that child care brings in local produce. That's great. Thanks, Brittany. And then student-run farmers markets. What a great idea. And then Barb says that producer programs are producer programs recognizing with activity passes, banners, or common areas, also plaques. And then Luis is very new to the concept of farm to school and don't have much interaction at this point, but he's going to reach out to them. So great. Okay. Thanks for sharing, everybody. Okay, so in this next section of the introduction, we want to provide an overview of the benefits of farm to school for producers, and we've kind of been talking about that all along, right? And we want producers to also hear from other producers, like that peer learning component that are experienced in farm to school. And so this section includes a couple of different regionalization opportunities. So slides 12 through 13, also on pages 21 through 22 of your facilitator guide, and page 3 of the producer workbook, includes a little bit of information about that, how school sales can provide a financial impact and benefit farm to school or benefit producers, such as increased income from, not only increased income from farm to school sales, but also establishing a long-term revenue stream for individual producers and a more stable revenue stream, as well as increasing the market diversification for the producer. We also want producers to know that selling to schools and participating in farm to school programming may benefit profitability directly, as we just described, through increased sales, or also indirectly through diversified marketing strategies. For example, marketing actually goes beyond just selling to schools, and it also occurs with students and families in the cafeteria and at those school events. There's also an opportunity to kind of use it as a marketing tool and advertising their producers work with schools and in other marketing outlets such as farmers markets and in grocery stores and such. So this section also includes a snapshot of ways that farm to school may align with a farmer's goals, such as we heard Dave Prather yesterday at Western Montana Growers Co-op. He has kids in school, so he has an interest of nourishing kids and seeing them eat local and fresh products, as well as promoting agriculture as a career pathway for youth, and then increasing the visibility of smaller farms within the community. So those are kind of some benefits from the producer side, right? This is also an opportunity to highlight some of the economic impact data on producers selling to schools and farm to school participation data in your state, if you have it. And actually, Tomas is going to talk about this next in the how to use this in the farm to school census data. And this is where contextualizing the benefits for producers from your local region and similar locations can be really helpful. And we actually have time built into those state breakout sessions today to brainstorm how you can localize and customize your training content for your local producer audience. And here's another way that you can kind of regionalize or spotlight producers at your local producer training. And this may take so slides 14 through 16, they're basically intended to be a spot for producers that you're training to hear from a producer, similar in the panel that we did yesterday, or just having a producer Q&A or share out discussion with a farm to school farmer champion in your state, or somebody that's actually been able to access some of the USDA farm to school grants. This also could be a video of a producer sharing their farm to school story that you'll see throughout the training over the next couple of days. There's also quotes here, as you can see in these slides, and they're actually quotes from farmers that we've worked with in the past, but they're ultimately meant to be placeholders. So we encourage you to kind of think about the producers that you know that are successfully selling to schools, and including the quotes from them in these slides. And then, consider having, some producers coming into the classroom, or not classroom, into the facility that you're teaching producers, and doing a Q&A. You could do some pre-recorded content too, but just thinking of ways to interact with successful producers selling to schools. And so if you are having ideas coming up about how to kind of localize that content, be sure to jot it down in your action plan, and we can make sure to bring it up in your breakout session. So any questions at this point? All right. So this next section is going to really introduce the goal setting piece and action planning resource. And goal setting and action planning helps producers really assess how their lifestyles, farm landscape, and mission can frame their market selection. And producers, we're encouraging you to have producers review their goals and how these relate to school sales. And this type of goal setting that we're talking about here is referred as whole farm goal setting. And I believe, was it Barb? Was it she read the definition of the whole farm goal setting in the glossary. And the concept doesn't need to really be covered any further, but that, just so you know, is for the purposes of being a facilitator, that's kind of the approach that we're taking onto this first section. And if you are interested in learning more about whole farm goal setting, there's a digging deeper into the core concepts in the very beginning of this section or in Appendix A. So page 4 of the producer workbook aligns with slide 18 in the facilitator guide on page 23. And it begins to walk producers through thinking about how their goals, both on and off the farm, may align with selling to schools. So the diagram that you see here is shown in both the producer workbook and the facilitator guide, as well as it's on the slide. And it really illustrates, what we're trying to do here is illustrate the interconnected variables that shape a producer's farm goals as they relate to school sales. That includes those lifestyle goals, how their product and selling to school is a community asset, their marketing, as well as profitability, and how those all correspond with their farm business and their production capabilities. And at the end of the intro, producers will spend some time reflecting on these variables and which of them relate to their goals and motivations for selling to schools. And we encourage trainers to start this conversation though at this point and by asking producers if they have some sort of business plan or have thought about their goals. Because a lot of times farmers haven't written down their goals, but they definitely have given those thought. And so having them think about that and how those variables might impact their decision to actually sell to schools. Next, you'll be guiding producers through taking the school business assessment. And this assessment is introduced to producers on page 4 through 5 of their workbook. And you'll see on page 5 of the producer workbook, this sample assessment is actually filled out. And it's part of that, it's the very beginning of that school business action planning guide. So we want producers to basically see, okay, where am I at in terms of selling to schools and what areas do I need to work on as I'm heading into this training. And this assessment will be used, as you can see here on your screen, there's a way you can see where this particular sample, the producer has needs to work on understanding the school purchasing practices. They definitely need to understand how to connect with school buyers, but their goals align with schools. They have strong production skills, experience in selling to wholesale buyers. So really this producer is kind of an ideal producer for selling or attending this training. But we want you folks to, or we want the farmer to go through this in their action plan, and we'll talk about that next. So once you've talked about this sample assessment, then you'll prompt them to take like 5 minutes to turn to page 53 of their workbook and fill out their own assessment. And I really don't think it would take more than 5 minutes for a producer to fill this out. And once they filled out the assessment, You can ask where they might have gaps in what they need to think about as they're entering into this training. So this last section of the introduction is just getting producers to get familiar with the school business action plan. And we really want the action plan to provide an opportunity for the producer to start thinking about tangible next steps for selling to schools that reflect the goals that they've identified. And as I've already noted, you should already be there. So the producer workbook, this starts on page 52 and 53 of the producer workbook. And you'll see throughout the curriculum that we've built in time at the conclusion of each module for producers to really kind of go back to their action plan in real time. And they'll be doing this module by module throughout your training. And it may be useful to actually provide some action plan samples for producers, but also to like print off the action plan so producers aren't having to go back and toggle back and forth between this resource and the section that they're working on in their producer workbook. So this is that assessment that we just talked about. That's the action plan starts out with that assessment. And then after that, you'll see on page 54, a checklist, which helps producers understand and assess what they see as the benefits of farm to school and what support they might need in achieving the goals related to selling to schools. And this checklist really aligns with the content that, as you can see, is on the slide 21, so that you'll be presenting. So at this point, you'll be introducing the idea of action planning, and it really aligns with the SMART goals. If you all are familiar with the SMART goals goal setting format, and as you walk producers through the action plan, you're setting them up to identify their motivations, but also their short and long-term goals for selling to schools, and as well as identifying any kind of value they can provide to schools and those critical next steps in the next 6 to 12 months. And then what kind of resources do they need to implement their plan? And at this point, you're going to prompt producers to take like 5 to 10 minutes to fill out the questions on page 54 in their workbook. And this is really a culmination of the thinking they've been doing this whole introduction about benefits, motivations, and their goals. And so to recap, at the end of the introduction, we want producers to have filled out that assessment, and then the checklist shown here on page 54. And ideally, producers can then move forward with this information and those identified strengths and gaps and goals to help them really navigate the training and identify those, strategies that they need to really pay attention to through as you dig into modules 1 through 4. And if you need some additional support for preparing for this topic, we suggest visiting those Digging Deeper resources on page 18 of the Facilitator Guide, as well as we actually did a recorded training of using the action planning tool. And we have we also have a few producers talking about how they've used goal setting to sell to access school sales. And I will make sure that is listed in the chat here. And this is where the introduction content ends. in the facilitator guide. But before we move on to any questions and module 1, I want to provide a sneak peek about the rest of the action plan because it's going to come up throughout all of the modules. So we've already looked at those first 3 pages of the action plan and that kind of goal checking section on page 54. And then on page 55, you see a list of those end of module check-ins. So they really, I'm sure you've all noticed that they correspond really, they pretty much correspond with the objectives of each module. And as we go through the rest of the modules today and tomorrow, you'll continue to see those end of module check-ins at the end of our overviews. And they're really intended to be a jumping off point so the producers can then add those short-term strategies, immediate next steps, and timelines for each module content area. And then finally, just summarizing at the very end of the training and the conclusion, how they those next short-term strategies are culminated in the final summary table that you can see on page 61. And that's a lot. I think it actually takes more time to explain the introduction than it actually does to go through it with producers. But I am going to pause and see if there's any questions. And thanks, Tomas, for putting stuff in the chat. And I'm seeing lots of stuff on whole farm goal setting. Yes, and I know the Farm Beginnings course is a whole farm goal setting course. So thank you for sharing that resource, Stephanie. There's some chatter about the Omaha Home for Boys that's looking for farm to school programming. That's great. We're doing some sharing here. Also, Leanne had another great intro icebreaker. Thank you for sharing that.
Tammy, there was one request to see if we could get a copy of the chat shared with the group.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. That is shared. We will be recording this, which I know you all don't want to spend 16 hours, an additional 16 hours going through this, but the chat will also be shared. So I think it probably will be way easier to share the chat than because we have to download the training videos and then upload them onto YouTube. So yeah, we'll work on sharing the chat before that. But yeah, thanks for pointing out the Farm Beginnings resources. That's a really great whole farm planning tool. We don't have a completed sample of this of the whole school business action plan, but we have examples that we can include, and I will share that with you, Margaret, that I believe that is on the website. If not, I'll make sure I get that as a resource for you. Yeah, thanks, Margaret.
All right, welcome back, everyone. So we're going to be diving into module 1, and just forewarning, module 1 is kind of lengthy. So I'll be trying my best to break it up with plenty of activities that will pull some of your participation and engagement. There's plenty of room and space for you all to earn some points. We'll be watching 2 videos, so that'll definitely break up some of the lecturing, and the last chunk of that time, so we have about 65 minutes for this session. The last chunk of it is really going to be meant for you all to get in your breakout session. So I'll I'm going to do my job to get through all the content and allow you all to have the very least 15 minutes of breakout time with your group. So barring that I don't lose my voice throughout the talking, we should be able to get to that goal. So yeah, we're going to start off today. And again, this is module 1. Like Tammy had mentioned, I think explaining these modules take a bit longer than actually utilizing them. So you'll find that you'll work out a rhythm for your own local producer training, and depending on what content you'll be leaving in, it'll affect just the amount of time it'll take to actually cover all of the points that need to be covered in this trainer's toolkit. So yeah, with that, we're going to get started with module 1. So module 1 is getting to know your school market, which focuses on what producers need to know about school food programs. And the goal is to increase producer ability to customize to their needs, focusing on what is most relevant and most important for producers to know. And in addition to that, we hope to demonstrate how you as trainers can edit, customize, and use the content and resources that best fit the needs of your audience. So in addition to that, a second goal is to help producers understand school buyers enough for them to be able to actually market and negotiate with school buyers directly. So it's our hope that they'll be able to understand school buyer needs, perspectives, and how their products can meet those needs. So in addition to that, we hope to provide producers with a realistic view of farm to school sales and let them make the decision if farm to school sales is right for them. So this section will offer a few activities and gives you all as trainers an opportunity to pick and choose what activities make most sense for your producer audience. This is a long section, as I said, and I'll be sharing a lot of information. So please share any questions through the chat, and our team will be able to work to provide answers for you there. And like I said, it's my hope that we can get through the content of module 1 and allow you all to really break out into your state teams for the remainder of the session. Okay, so just to orient everyone to the materials, please start by opening page 25 of the Facilitator's Guide, where module 1 begins. And you'll also need to have page 6 of the producer workbook handy, where module 1 begins as well. So in addition to that, the producer training slide decks that we have provided for you all are available online, free for you to download, edit, and customize when it comes time to conduct your own producer training. So looking at the training module outline on page 25, this module, when implemented in producer training, is designed to take about an hour, depending on the number of optional activities you include. It's also including an optional content section that will add maybe about an additional 20 to 25 minutes, depending on what parts of that you'll be including. And then there are 3 sections to just the overall module 1 itself. And those sections are section A, which is child nutrition programs, section B, which is local food sourcing and procurement in school meal programs, and then the optional section C, which dives into additional child nutrition programs, the child and adult care food program, as well as summer food service programs. So continuing in the Facilitator's Guide, you'll find core concepts which include digging deeper into resources to help you as a facilitator better understand these core concepts, and case studies associated with this module as well. I'll go over a few key terms and provide some facilitator tips for you all to start the section. And moving along, let's jump into module 1 content itself and go over how you might approach presenting the content at your local producer training. So we'll start by introducing the learning objectives for producers, which include an understanding of the scope and diversity of child nutrition programs, understanding how CNP plan menus, process foods, and prepare meals, and then to understand the basic regulations governing school food procurement. So as you can see from those objectives, there is some language there that may be unfamiliar to producers. And one way we start to introduce producers to that language is through a Jeopardy game that we have included as an optional activity at the beginning of each module. So we have recommendations for how to create the game and how to use key terms that you can find in the glossary. So with that, it's going to lead us into our actual first activity, and we're just going to play a quick round of Jeopardy with 3 questions for you all. And mind you, these questions are for points. So what I'll ask is that if you're able to come off mute and share your answer. And because this is Jeopardy, you'll need to share your answer in the form of a question. So I'm going to give a definition, and you will provide me with a key term in the form of a question. So to get us started, here's the first definition. A commercial enterprise or nonprofit organization that acts on behalf of a school food authority by managing or directing any aspect of the school meal program.
Food service management company?
I think you got it, Deb.
Okay.
Great, thank you. And can you remind us what state you're in?
North Dakota.
Wonderful. Excellent. All righty, next question, definition. The act of purchasing goods and services, for example, food for child nutrition.
What?
Someone had their hand raised. I couldn't see their.
It's Margaret Milligan from Nebraska. Go for it.
What is procurement?
Yep. Nice. Way to go. All right, and the last question. So a person who oversees the procurement of food for a school or district.
School food authority? What is a school food authority?
No. I think we're looking for a specific position.
What
What?
is food service director?
Yes, I would also take school nutrition director. There's a lot of variations to that title, but that's the term I was looking for. Mhm.
Lisa, where are you from? Lisa Lauer.
Great,
I'm from Missouri.
Okay.
excellent. Mhm. All righty, so yeah, that serves as an example of how you can get producers acclimated to just a range of new terms. And then, we find that the definitions and the associations with those terms really stick if they're administered through the game like this. So again, this is an optional part of delivering the module content. So use it as you see fit, but we find that it does help and also just breaks the ice for everyone too. So definitely consider using it. Okay, so after the introduction, we're going to jump into, you should be jumping into section A, which is the child nutrition programs. And starting this out, this section is an opportunity for state and regional customization by highlighting child nutrition programs, specifically local purchasing by the numbers in your state. The aim is to start strong in emphasizing to producers the market opportunity for child nutrition programs in their state. So, we do this by really focusing on highlighting success stories and really displaying those success stories either through maybe something more immediate and more condensed than a case study. So if there is an article, if there's a video perhaps, or maybe some news or media coverage of a successful farm to school story within your region or state, that's something that really serves as a great model of exemplifying a success in farm to school within your area. So with that, we recommend a video of farm to school in action. And in the facilitator's guide, we have several options from various regions, but we recommend maybe trying to find one specific to your state or region, or specific to a agricultural production type that would make most sense depending on your producer audience. So here, this is hip agriculture in Kapahua, Hawaii. And this is the Hawaii Institute of Pacific Agriculture. So I'm going to actually share a quick video of their farm to school in action. Just give me one moment. Oops.
Farm to School has huge opportunity to support children in getting healthy. And on the other hand, it's going to be supporting farmers. It is the largest potential market and buyer of fresh local produce in the state.
We have this opportunity to bring more fresh fruits and vegetables into the schools to create more opportunities for small farms to supply the school and to really transform our state's food economy.
My husband Dash and I, we founded Hip Agriculture back in 2011. We chose this path to become farmers when I became pregnant with our first child. So we've been able to raise our children on the farm, feeding them really fresh food.
When we got the word that Kohala schools were going to be the first pilot for farm to school in the state, we were so thrilled. We jumped at the opportunity to become a supplier to the Kohala cafeteria.
Farm to School is taking out the big distributors and inserting our local farmers. Instead of taking frozen foods and microwaving them, we're taking fresh foods and cooking them from scratch. Garden to Cafeteria takes Farm to School one step further. Food that the students are growing is harvested by them and delivered by the students to the cafeteria. It also presents an opportunity for the students to take home fresh produce that they helped grow. It'll help create a demand for more local produce.
It's also all of the educational programs we do to reconnect youth to the land, to farms, to where their food comes from.
After the pilot of Kohala Complex, the state decided that they want to expand Farm to School to all 256 schools across the state, which is almost 200,000 meals a day.
This is a huge opportunity to revitalize agriculture statewide because we've never had such a large market. If they just serve banana smoothies one extra day a week, that's thousands of pounds of bananas that Hawaii farmers can grow for local youth. Gardens are the best places for young people to learn.
The hands-on, experiential, tactile learning where they're smelling, they're tasting, and they're part of cooking it and preparing it. That's the way we're going to get children to eat healthier new foods.
We're building a pilot and a model for what farm to school looks like.
That's our role, is really committed to making and helping the DOE and the Kohala cafeteria work out the kinks so that we can say what works and doesn't work. Hawaii has the potential to be the example for the world of what it means to live sustainably and feed our people well. We are working on building the farmers that are going to be needed to grow the food for our communities.
Great. Yeah. So I really think that Hip Agriculture provides a really great demonstration of farm to school in action. And like I said, there are plenty of other examples that we've included in the facilitator's guide, but there are likely so many more that we're not aware of that are specific to your state or area that you can uplift and highlight in your own ways. So definitely recommend starting and leading with that, just to set the tone for success for producers when they think about farm to school. All righty, so moving on. So next we asked producers to engage in another applied activity, and this is one where we can bring it back to childhood and really reflect on the idea or the memories of school meals, and what do they think of. So for you all right now, I'm going to engage and start that activity for you all, and would like you to just utilize the chat or come off mute and think of a school food item memory or school meal memory, and really what comes to mind for you. It's always interesting, this workshop going around the country, getting a sense of the similarities between our school meals and some of the unique differences. So if you're able to, in the chat or come off mute and just share what a school memory is for you all. Real big potatoes, that sounds good. Chili and cinnamon rolls.
I'll come off the chat, off mute. I am in Rapid City, South Dakota now, but I went to school in Brooklyn, New York. And my favorite was always those warm donuts in the morning. My mom never cooked for us in the morning, and going to school and knowing that I would have a nice warm donut was the highlight of my day.
That's great. Thank you for sharing. Lots of chili. I grew up in the Midwest, Chicagoland area. Never really had chili. Pigs in a blanket, chicken patty sandwich. I think we all remember that. One interesting meal that I had was, which I always thought was hilarious, was taco in a cup. And it was literally just a cup with ground beef and like Fritos and cheese and lettuce thrown in it and some tomatoes. And it was taco in a cup. So yeah, thank you for sharing those memories. And yeah, this really underscores with producers, thinking about their own school meals and really illustrating how school meals may have changed from when they were youth to where we are now, and asking them to reflect on meals, and in addition to the video that we just saw, is just really a nice way of framing what could be and what could be future meal memories for our current youth right now. So it's probably best to kind of pair these two activities, and the video displaying and then this activity sort of in tandem with each other, just so you can get some conversations going and jump off that as a success story and a motivation to do this work. All righty. So after this engagement, we jump into the core contents of the overview of the child nutrition programs. And in this section, we want to orient producers to what school meals look like now. They are delicious and can be full of local foods. And, we also want to break down the language of programs that we'll be discussing. So we know that child nutrition programs is not a farmer-friendly term. So from here out in the module, we transition to school meal programs as a term. And, this is where we'll clarify the distinction in those programs and what programs we are talking about. So we're going to kind of just do a little terminology switch to talk about child nutrition programs as school meal programs, which is, I think, way more accessible and not loaded with kind of industry jargon. So, and then, after orientation, we come back to a little bit more of the nitty gritty of school meal programs. and always, thinking about the purpose of what does a producer need to understand to make the decision if school sales are right for them, and what business methods and approaches do they need to think about when approaching school buyers. So on this slide here, we address school meal by the numbers on national level. And again, underscoring the market opportunity, this is a great place to remind producers of the local and state information that can be shared. And let's see, we'll briefly explain who the key players are in farm to school. The producers are at the USDA, and they're designed, a training or they're perhaps presenting to folks they're being presented to by folks from state agencies or other nonprofits that are helping to advocate for farm to school. So maybe this is just an opportunity for them to get acclimated of what sort of stakeholders or what sort of facilitators may be at the table when acclimating them to farm to school. So next, we address the key drivers that determine what school meal programs purchase and serve. Meal pattern and nutrition requirements and meal costs as well. So the purpose is to uplift these meal components and to help producers begin to think about what products they grow or produce might be of interest to school markets. This is an important foundational part of the work. And it really sets the stage for further planning, which will be picked up in Module 3. So in some of our previous panels, we've heard specifically from producers who specifically talked about school meal programs as a challenge, and some of the challenges in meeting sort of orange or apple or other vegetable requirements, and how this is kind of an opportunity that we can capture their attention on to think about some of the products that they have and what it will mean to maybe scale up or slightly modify some other practices just to meet some of the specific requirements the schools have. So we ask producers to take a moment to think about exactly what they're already producing that would be a good fit for school meals. And then moving on, we think about meal cost and reimbursement. Our purpose here is to provide a realistic view of what school meal programs are working with, but also to dispel any kind of myths that schools can afford to purchase local food. So, we also want to demonstrate that the volume of meals served creates an opportunity for high dollar sales, and really illustrates just the amount of money that is behind school purchasing. And we'll dig into that in later modules, but this is also just a good context setter in the forefront to really talk about some of the potential earnings that could be made through farm to school as well. So next, we dive into the section highlighting the diversity of school meal programs. And here we elevate the very different needs of school meal programs, which include, volume of product, as you see in this chart here, the type of kitchen or kitchen equipment that might be in a school, and then, types of school meal program models that differ from district to district or school to school. So this will help producers start to consider what type of program they may fit into best, or what they may have to sort of change things up to meld into better. And with that, I'm going to pause again and share a pretty interesting video of that process in action.
It's just a good concept for children to be able to relate where the food they eat comes from and know that it's right within their own region. Well, when we first found out that collards were going to be available through the Farm to School program, thought back to my childhood, and every time my mom cooked collards, it was in the biggest pot that we had in the house. So I looked in the back of our cook chill department. I said, there's 2 huge pots. I bet we could cook collards in those. It was a little trial and error at first, getting the seasoning right. And of course, the staff was a little wary at first. But if there's one constant, it's going to be change. We're going to be challenged and required to do new things. And that's a good thing because we are creating change in our children's dietary habits and improving them. So if we expect our kids to improve, then we've got to do the same.
Very good. They look good. Very good, Sharita. Ready to go.
We think that by creating demand, we can also help stimulate the supply. That's one of the largest barriers that we have is strictly being able to get the supply at the level that we would use.
1 case of sweet peas. 1 case, 3 cans of mixed fruit. 4 bags of pears. That'll work.
What's unique about us is we do deliver groceries and supplies to every school every day.
3 spaghetti sauce. 4 bags of collard greens.
That's about 22,000 lunches and close to 9,000 breakfasts a day.
2 cucumbers.
What we deliver today is served in the school the next day. Strawberries, watermelons, kids really like. But to get them to try the vegetables takes a little more encouragement sometimes. We found that it really helps to work with other stakeholders in the farm to school and agriculture industry. We're helping promote Food Corps and Cooperative Extension and North Carolina farmers. They're helping promote school lunch. If you engage someone and you show interest in them, then they're going to be interested in what you're offering. You model for them, you know, that this is enjoyable. And once they try it and like it, they become good converted customers, you know, that like things that maybe they're not seeing at home anymore. You know, we're taking baby steps, but I think that we'll start to make strides before long.
You want to try some? Do you taste it?
Yeah, so that's that story and that video really just outlines some of the processes that kind of happen in the kitchen or the aggregator space to really prepare some of the products that producers may have set for school markets. Um, let's see now. So this brings us to our next applied activity for this section. And this is an activity that we highly recommend making time for in the producer training. So you can orient yourselves to the facilitator instructions in the facilitator guide on page 36. And you can find the worksheet for this activity on page 10 of the producer workbook. The aim of this activity is to help producers get to know their local school markets and what school districts are buying, what school districts are near them that are buying local products or maybe have an interest in buying local products. So what you'll be doing is helping them navigate to the USDA Farm to School Census website and explore some of the data that's there based off of district or state state outlines. So we're just going to take a pause and I'm going to pull that website up for you all. Okay, so this is the homepage of the Farm to School Census website by the USDA. And to get a look at some of the farm to school activity, the best way to navigate is to go to census results and census results overview. There, there's plenty of data related to program types and a number of other things, but I want to direct you all the way down to the bottom actually, which I think you can access on the web on the main page as well. But here you can actually dial in to your locale and find out what some of these schools within your area are purchasing. So for a regional example, we're going to do 100 miles, and then we're going to actually look up Colorado Springs. So 80829. So this will produce some of the the school districts within 100 miles of that zip code. And depending on which ones you click, there'll be varying results depending on, if they answered the survey, if they participated in the census. And up top here, we have Mentos Springs, which did participate. And it'll give you kind of a profile of that district as it relates to farm to school. And if you want to see what food they're purchasing, so the top 5 foods, you'll go down to local food purchases and expand that. And then here, you'll be able to see just what types of food that they're purchasing. So the top 5 there. So I would love for you all to access that website and go through the steps that I outlined for you all, and really figure out what schools are purchasing within your own areas. So let's just take the next few minutes to do that and go ahead and share the results in the chat or come off mute and we can just have a quick conversation around what schools are interested in purchasing within your area. Beef, yeah. Is anyone able to pull up any results that are interesting or maybe some that you didn't expect to see there?
I can share.
Mhm.
Hi, everyone. In Montana, and I also love the bananas on this one. That's good. I looked up a school in my town, and they actually didn't complete the census, but I chose a nearby one, and their top food was beef, which, you know, makes a lot of sense for Montana.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Alrighty, well, if you're able to share through the chat any other findings based off those census results, go ahead and do that. You can share them throughout and we can have some conversations around that a little later. But for the sake of moving on, we're going to jump back into our slides. And let's see here. So we're going to jump into section B, which is local food sourcing and procurement in school meals. And this section is to provide producers enough information to be able to talk to and understand the decision-making and the position of school food buyers. So to start, with that, we want to look at farm to school supply chains and helping producers understand who those key players are in getting food from producers to schools and thinking about some of the multiple pathways that will be later explored in module 2. So we want to dig into what serving local food in schools looks like, including how a school might define local and why that matters, how schools source local food, which gives a great opportunity to regionalize by sharing specifics from distributors and processors or retailers in the area. And we want to touch on how schools incorporate local foods, including beyond our standard of meals. So again, another great opportunity for regionalization and to talk about the different programs, State Plate or Harvest of the Month, that can create an opportunity for connectivity between producers and schools. We also want to highlight stories and how producers have cultivated those connections on their own as well. And then, this all ties back into our introduction section, which is cultivating relationships and identifying the pathways for producers to align with school districts and their needs. So we also want producers to have a sense of timing when it comes to purchasing, especially understanding the need to get to know your school buyer's schedule and planning cycles. This cycle example may not be exactly the same from school to school, but can be customized based off of your region, just to give producers an example and a sense of when they need to be developing relationships with potential school buyers. Timing may be very different from other market outlets, and knowing when these decisions should be made is really going to help give the producers a leg up in approaching and initiating those relationships with school buyers. So that takes us to our next applied activity. And this activity is all about reading about farm to school sales in action and considering everything that has been discussed and what producers see in these many case studies to consider what type of program, what size and scale program might work best for them. So to orient you, we have the Facilitator's Guide on page 40 with guidance and the worksheet and mini case studies for this activity on page 10. And in this activity, producers will be maybe divided in groups, maybe based off of tables or whatever seating clusters they may have. And each group will read one of the mini case studies and then discuss using the guidance in the worksheet. So this activity can be customized based on the time that you have available. Mini case studies related to this activity or experts of it are included and also available through podcasts in their more of a robust form in that way. So it's a great time to really remind producers that there are a lot of supplemental resources out there for them beyond what they've been given at the local producer training. So let's take about 3 minutes to read one of the brief case studies and consider this first question. What made a good fit for this producer and buyer? And then after the 3 minutes, we can just share some of our thoughts.
Sorry, Tomas, maybe I'm missing this, but so do we need to go to the case studies website or where are we reading the
So
case study?
you'll be going to, so in the facilitator's guide, this is page 40 with the guidance on like reviewing the case study. And then the activity is on page 12 to 13 of the producer's workbook.
Oh, okay, sorry. Thank you. I'm modeling how folks can ask if they're lost.
All right, that's about 3 minutes, I think, Tomas.
Yeah. Yeah. So what jumped out for you all? Yeah. Let's take a quick minute to just share some thoughts.
I just wanted to share, again, because we work with the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program a lot in our state, of course, finding the right fit through the program, such as Fresh Fruit and Vegetable, also processing items, if you can off-season, to be able to use them then throughout the school year. And then also possibly working with a producer to narrow the types of items to what would fit best into your meal programs.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. Jessica shared the MPS one, where farmer wanted to grow fewer vegetables, but a larger quantities, and working with the school helped them to do that.
This is Linda from Utah. I read the Sweets Produce, and I thought it was interesting that the school district approached the farmer that had been there for 40 years. But the benefit for the farmer is that that first gate that he walked through with that school was the beginning of other gates opening. And one of the things that the small to mid-sized producers have a hard time with, if they sell to restaurants, sometimes they don't get their money. It's a fickle business, and I liked how they said with the school districts, it's a certain percentage of his sales, but it's a secure percentage of his sales.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Linda.
This is Rhonda from North Dakota. And I also was interested in the MPS program. The thing that stood out to me was the third-party company that took care of those really hard to process vegetables. Kohlrabi and winter squash are two that my kitchen staff hated to deal with because the chopping of those vegetables, even just cutting off the rinds, are just extremely difficult. We would actually bring in volunteers on the days that we would get those types of fresh produce from farmers. And so having that availability of a third-party company to help out with that processing is really helpful, and love to see if there's ideas out there to get a company started. I think there's probably one in Fargo, North Dakota, but the rest of the state is pretty dry for that kind of a partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. All righty. Well, yeah, hopefully that applied activity really kind of outlines how you can approach getting producers acclimated to some of the narratives and other stories of producers who took that first step into farm to school, and some of the action steps that may be needed on their part, as well as just schools in general, or third-party aggregators in their area who can help sort of initiate and liven this process up. Alrighty. So coming out of that activity, we come to our last topic of this section, and this is School Food Procurement 101. And the following modules really go into depth on what schools' sales look like on the producer side. So this is really just a high-level orientation to, again, help producers understand the perspective of a school buyer. And in this section, the procurement standards and how they relate to what school buyers adhere to is what will be covered, in addition to the use of geographic preference and what that can mean for a local producer. Additionally, what procurement methods and purchasing thresholds may exist, and then of course, what a high-level overview of the entire procurement process. So with that, we wrap up this module and we go into the action planning. And, we start the wrap up with the School Food 101 game. And in this activity, we're just going to, what we'll do is I'll be asking a few questions, and these are true or false questions. And I think it would be best, rather than coming off mute, to just get your keyboards ready and share true or false, or I will accept T or F, whatever is easiest for you. And I'm just going to go down a list of questions, and whoever answers first will get a point for their state. So these questions are really meant to just bring home the content in module 1, and then help to also dispel some of the myths about school food purchasing and just farm to school in general. So Yep, to get us started, I'm going to start with the first question. So, if I am not a fruit or vegetable producer, I cannot sell my products to child nutrition programs.
False.
All righty. I got to keep up. It looks like the first person was Nicole in the chat.
Nicole, where are you from? Remind us.
Wyoming.
Okay.
Great.
Thanks.
Wyoming. All right, next question. Well, actually, hold on one sec. Yep. Okay, next question. The only way to get my products to children is through school lunch.
I think Christine was first.
Christine?
Yes, Christine Kostick. Where are you from?
North Dakota.
Yeah. I'm from North Dakota.
Great. All righty, next question. Schools might be particularly interested in the sweet potatoes I grow because they are required to serve red orange vegetables.
No.
Rhonda. Rhonda's North Dakota, right?
I have no hope.
I'm so glad you're helping me, Tammy, because
I know it's hard. I'm so glad actually Andrea's kind of helping because she'll go to whoever that next thing is, and it helps me differentiate.
Mhm. All right, next question. There is no way that schools can afford to purchase my products with their spending limitations.
Jessica, right. You're from Colorado, right, Jessica?
Great. All right, next question. Different school food authorities and different child nutrition programs require different volumes of product.
Rhonda, again.
All right, and this is the last question. USDA dictates food safety requirements for schools.
Rhonda, you're pretty fast with the keyboard. And the next person also is from North Dakota. So yeah, okay. North Dakota again.
Great. Yeah, so, as you have time in your training, we have a series of questions for reflection, for producers to think about their current situation and capacity. And, we have their action planning opportunity as well, which is built into the facilitator's guide and then the producer workbooks as well. So, before we wrap up, let's see here. Before we wrap
Ross,
up,
actually, do you mind, since we had actually a couple folks who thought that food safety one was true, I do just want to clarify that, USDA requires that anyone that someone's buying products from has to follow all the federal and state and local regulations governing their area of business. Like if it's a dried chickpea company, they're following all of the appropriate dried chickpea rules. But other than that, the USDA doesn't say, hey, because you're a local farmer, you need to do X, Y, and Z. Or, so USDA really doesn't dictate those types of food safety decisions. It's the schools or the sponsors that determine those specific vendor requirements around food safety and other elements of what they're looking for in a vendor.
Excellent. Thank you so much for providing that context, Andrea. Yeah, so we're wrapping up now, but I did want to indicate where you can find some of the start of some of the optional content. And if you were to navigate to Appendix C in the Facilitator's Guide, there you'll have some of the optional components that you can add to what we really set out for Module 1. So go ahead and access that when you can, but other than that, that's Module 1 for you. Pretty painless, I would say. I thought it would take a little longer than expected. So it looks like we have, let's see here.
I think Tomas, Carlos is setting up a breakout session for 10 minutes, and then we'll go into a like a 15-minute break. So
I do want to share there was a question from earlier from Sarah about has the group got to find the exact wording after all of the true false mayhem, but the question was about the fact that we're now in the time of COVID, and has the producer training team taken that into account, and where are good places, particularly in the training, to bring that up?
Yeah, where would be the best place for that, Tammy?
So I think through the panels is one way. Like we have been trying to bring that up through the panel and site visit questions, and kind of doing some targeted questions, as you heard Brian and Dave talk about yesterday. The other places you'll see as we start going into more detail in modules 3, we talk about salad bars, and unfortunately in many school districts are not doing salad bars. So trying to adapt the curriculum. But I think because there's so many restrictions or variations in restrictions now, it's really hard to figure that out on a national scale. So we encourage, that might be something in the next breakout session where we talk about regionalization opportunities. So again, that would be another area to kind of create localized and regional content.
Great, thank you. Alrighty, well, I think Carlos has this queued up for our first breakout session of the day. I'm sorry it wasn't going to be a little longer, but you'll still get some time to process with your team on the introduction in module 1 too. So yeah, let's spend the next few minutes with our state teams, and then we'll come back for a 15-minute break.
All right, folks, we're going to get back at it because we want to provide you with plenty of opportunity to connect in the second breakout session of the day, because we understand it's really fun to connect with folks from your state. So next we're going to talk about we're going to go over module 2, which is selling to school markets. And I am here in the stead of my colleague, Robert Maggiani, who typically gives this presentation, but he's not feeling very well today. So I told him I'd take over. So hopefully I'll do as well as he does. Okay, so basically in module 2, we're gonna be introducing you to all of these tools that you can see. This isn't new to you at this point, but you can turn to page 46 of your facilitator guide, as well as page 17 in your producer workbook. And these provide an overview of the topics that are going to be addressed within this particular module, as well as the content and core concepts and any of the training
activities and materials. So just that high level overview right there is what we start with. And then if you are like me and have middle-aged eyes, you can go back over to page 13 of the facilitator guide, so you can see the same outline in larger type, but it really is the same thing, that same exact outline that's included on page 46. Just a couple of different ways and options to look at that. So module 2, we want to take just a few minutes to focus on some of the core concepts for module 2, that and this section of the facilitator guide on pages 46 and 47 gives you an idea of what is covered. And basically we're looking at those food supply chains and marketing channels, as well as the different kinds of distribution methods and wholesale marketing practices that that producers can enter into to sell to schools. We briefly touch on food safety, but that's really reserved for module 4. We also talk about, this is the module where we start to dig into some of those product standards, grading and specifications. And then we really dig into, and especially in section B, the school procurement process and common vendor requirements. And you'll see that in the solicitation packet that we'll talk about here in a sec. And then how the school district and the food service, the roles they play in that procurement process. And there's lots of digging deeper resources that you can see if you turn to page 47 for you folks that want to learn a little bit more about this particular topic before you start training producers. And then lots of different case studies for folks to consider as they start thinking about showing different producer examples in module 2. And as you can see, there are a lot of key terms in this particular module. And we'll get the opportunity to understand those terms in our Jeopardy game in a few minutes. But so you might want to start getting prepared for that. So facilitators start out, like in all of the different modules, showing producers what they hope that they're supposed to, what they want producers to get out of this particular module. And they closely match those core concepts that we talked about a few slides back. And we want producers really to identify that ideal marketing channel that might work for them to sell to schools based on their capacity and their goals. And then we want them to understand solicitations and including the vendor and quality standards outlined in the solicitation packet. And finally, we would like for producers to have and understand some ways of communicating with schools and working with buyers in general. So that's what we're hoping our producers get out of that. And this first section in module 2, we say it should take about 45 minutes. That's just a guideline, but it's all about those different pathways or marketing channels that farmers can use to sell to schools. So as with module 1, this Jeopardy game is a really great way to help producers and trainers get to know the lingo related to school markets and selling to schools. And as Tomas mentioned, this is an entirely optional activity, but we did find that as in developing this particular module, this is where we really struggled to have shared language with the folks that were working with producers primarily versus the folks that were working on the procurement end. So if you are planning on doing a just one of the Jeopardy activities, I think this might be the best one to do it with, but Tomas and Lacey might think otherwise for module 1. So we're gonna turn to page 105 of your facilitator guide. So you get your glossary ready. I'm gonna go there with you. And the first person to unmute and ask the question will earn a point for their state team. So let's go marketing channels for 100. And that will earn 1 point for your team. So a business that aggregates products for distribution of food at a local
Food hub.
or regional scale. Ah, Taylor. Yes. Okay, Taylor, where are you from?
Colorado.
All right, Taylor, 1 point for Colorado. Okay, let's go to school buyers for 400, or this will also earn 4 points for your team. So this is utilized when school districts participate in state or regional purchasing cooperatives and buying groups in order to help school districts obtain greater buying power.
What is collective purchasing?
Yes, Deb. Okay. 4 points for North Dakota. Yes. All right. All right, let's go to one more opportunity here. Vendor requirements for 200 or 2 points for your team. A voluntary audit that verifies that fruits and vegetables are produced, packed, and handled. Oh, what was that? And stored safely to prevent food safety hazards.
Good.
What is
are good
GAP?
agriculture practices?
I think Jan might have beat you to that.
Well, we're both from North Dakota, so.
Oh, you're both from North Dakota. Okay, so 2 points for North Dakota, an additional 2 points. All right, well, that was fun. And it also helped create some of those those questions in shared languages that that can be a challenge, especially when it comes to like procurement, solicitation, and marketing channels. So. Okay, section A is all about helping producers understand the different pathways that products take to get to schools and help producers figure out which pathway would be best for the product that they're planning on selling to schools. And this is a handy graphic, and it's located on slide 6 of your slide deck. And it's also available on the producer workbook on page 18. So it's just a visual representation of the different pathways that a producer's product will take to get to that school. And slide 7 explains the different forms of intermediate market channels that producers may consider when getting their product into schools. We spent some time on slides 8 through 10 going through each channel listed here on slide 7. And but we do focus on intermediate market channels just because it's essentially one step removed from the producers, and it enables producers to actually oftentimes maintain their brand identity, and it's a way for producers to get their foot in the door. So as Dave Prather from Western Montana Growers Co-op, who was on the panel yesterday, is a perfect example of one of the an intermediate market channel as a food hub and a growers co-op. And they're considered typically intermediated market channels are actually considered a value chain distributor because part of their marketing strategy is to actually market local and regional products, and they place a value on that. So that's what we mean by value chain. And so this module, as in most of the modules, we have an embedded 3-minute video about food hubs, and it explains about what that value chain is that I was just referring to. So like we're going to be doing here, we suggest that when you're doing your producer training, bring up a video, especially if you have one that is related to a producer or intermediated market channel within your region. Right now I'm gonna stop sharing and go into this this video and show you one of the case studies with Food Connects. From Vermont, and they're a food hub in Vermont. So.
Roster of producers that we work with. Those producers are primarily within a 50-mile radius of us here in Brattleboro, but the more time goes on, the more that we're able to bring in some producers and some special products from a little bit farther afield. So we have this roster of producers, and we list on a weekly basis, twice weekly. We offer their products to our customers through a web portal, an e-commerce site, essentially. When they do order from us through the website or any other way that we then enter into our web platform, that delivery is made as a unit on a set delivery day, up to twice a week right now, and the customer is invoiced for that order as a unit. So no matter how many producers they're buying from at once, they're getting one invoice. We technically do take ownership of the product, but a lot of the product that we sell on what we call a just-in-time basis. We have an order cycle, customers place their orders, cut it off, we assemble our purchase orders for farms in our area. We send out those purchase orders to farms, and they pick, wash, and pack to order on a one-day turnaround, typically 1 to 2 days. Then we deliver that freshly picked, freshly packed product straight to the customer. When it comes to produce to schools, almost all of that is still picked up straight from the farm, delivered the next day. And that's something that we take a lot of pride in being able to do. And I think our customers really value knowing that when they're ordering from the farm, they know it's just down the road. They know they're not getting something that's been stored for days or weeks. They're getting something straight from the farm.
All right, let me get my PowerPoint back up here. And I did have a question from somebody about whether or not we're able to provide MP4s, and we can. I can look into that, Jessica. They are available on the website, but they're through like YouTube videos at this point. So we'll look into that. Okay, let's get back here. Okay, so
Next, after you show them about the food hub, or an example of a food hub in your region, or then we encourage you to do an applied activity, which is exploring different food hubs within your region. And one little caveat we need to have you consider for this particular activity is that this link that I think Tomas or Lacey is going to include in your chat is that this is a self serve directory. So basically food hubs actually populate it themselves. And so we found that some of the information isn't completely up to date, or there's a lot of food hubs that have already been developed that haven't actually listed in this. But it is an opportunity to have producers look in their region, and you can narrow it down by zip code and the amount of miles and distance, and that can help them narrow down if that's a marketing channel that they're considering exploring. So slides 11 through 13 wrap up the different marketing channels for school sales. And we don't spend a ton of time on these marketing channels just because there's a lot of information out there already to help producers if they're interested in pursuing some of these marketing channels. We encourage producers to look at some of the amazing resources that are already out there. And but these are the slides are meant to just help producers understand that there's lots of different types of marketing channels for producers to engage in school sales out of that, aside from that direct to school. And then one thing else I wanted to point out is on slide 13, we have you explain that, point out that national wholesale distribution channels are, they're good channels if a producer already has a lot of production and wholesale experience already. But we typically don't encourage producers that, are don't have a whole lot of wholesale experience or aren't at a level of really understanding the cost of production and everything to enter into the wholesale distribution channels like broadline distributors and food service management companies, because we encourage them to look at some of these other market channels that might be a little easier to enter into and have less risk. So slides 14 through 17 really provide just this high level overview of the direct to school supply chain, and along with some of the considerations that are paid to all the other market channels that we've been talking about. And then section B provides way more detail about the direct to school sales. And this would be a good time for you to consider asking producers what they think a direct to school sale would look like, and to point out that direct to school sales can take the shape of many different types of marketing relationships, not just that traditional form of the solicitation and answering bids and the form of a procurement contract, but there's other forms of direct to school supply chain, such as there's some schools that actually purchase community supported agriculture shares. There's collective purchasing, and then actually some schools, really small school districts, will actually either buy from a grocery store or a farm stand or farmers markets, but those are typically reserved for really small school districts. And then finally, a list of some of the benefits and drawbacks before we start to really dig into the direct to school
sales, we really want to, point out to producers that there's lots of potential benefits, but, there's also things to consider in terms of drawbacks. And we'll go into that here in more detail in the next section. And if you remember, Carolyn had talked about how a lot of the producer support organizations that were surveyed for that needs assessment had talked about some kind of decision tree for the right market channel. So this is kind of our version of a decision tree. It's not like an exact tree, but it is a worksheet that helps producers understand and go work through the different pros and cons and basically rate the different types of marketing channels that might be best for their farm. And that's located on page 25 of the producer workbook, if you want to check that out. So we encourage you to spend a little bit of time, like, 5 to 10 minutes to have producers look through this assessment, and then also remind them that the way this is structured, that one is actually the best. So that's going to, if direct to school has the best profit margins, which is probably not the case, I would say it would be more the intermediate, then it would be number 1, and then 5 being the worst. So that's another thing I wanted to point out with that. All right, so I'm going to move into module 2, section B, which is that selling directly to school districts. But I want to pause and see if there's any questions. Not seeing any in the chat. Anybody want to go off mute and ask a question at this point? All right. Well, I'm gonna feel free to continue to put your questions in the chat, or even just go off mute and ask. That's fine with me. So section B is all about selling directly to school districts. And we really dig into school solicitations in slides 22 through 24. So explaining what a school solicitation is, how to access them, and then digging into a solicitation, understanding those product specifications. So, so this is getting to that piece of what Carolyn was talking about yesterday, is as another gap in understanding is just understanding those product specifications. So encouraging you to work with producers in going through an actual solicitation packet and doing an applied activity. So for those of you who have your producer workbook, this is in Appendix C, or page 65. And it is in an appendix because it actually has a, it does have a bid from the Durango School District, so go Colorado. And we also include links online to other types of solicitations by region. So you can go back, you can look at some of the solicitations from like an urban setting, I believe in Minneapolis and Albuquerque. Also, we show it, we have a link to the Albuquerque public school solicitation. So there's a couple of opportunities, but we also really encourage you to especially a lot of you folks are already working or are part of school districts. So consider including a solicitation from your region so folks can see what it looks like for for your region and the types of school districts that you might be, your producers might be approaching, you know, whether it be a rural or an urban school district. So, and you can take about, you know, 5 to 15 minutes. We're just right at this point, we're just kind of showing producers the different, the solicitation packet and kind of explaining the different components of that solicitation. And then we go back to kind of helping, once they have an understanding of what a solicitation looks like, you'll go back and start kind of explaining some of the components that are in that solicitation, including the vendor requirements that might be outlined in the solicitation, including, you know, post-harvest handling, food safety, any kind of insurance or liability, as well as distribution logistics, excuse me. And then talking with them about how they can actually respond to those solicitations, including, you know, what makes them better as a local vendor. And a lot of the ones that we feature in a lot of the solicitations that we're featuring here as examples are really for specifically for a local product. So then you'll take producers through, after you've talked them through some of the components of the solicitation and some of the things they might have to consider, we want them to look at worksheet 2B or page 106 of the producer workbook. And this is basically just an evaluation or of whether or not they're ready to actually meet and respond to the solicitation. So just going through details and lots of yes and no questions, and really tying in a lot of the components that we've been talking about up to this point. And then we start asking producers to understand how to actually come to that meeting prepared and approaching the school nutrition directors. So, and that's on slides 29 through 31. And we want producers to just have an understanding of what you need to do to be prepared for that meeting, and some tips like don't show up unannounced, don't show up at lunchtime, you know, all of these things that I think a lot of producers might already understand, especially if they're they've sold to restaurants and such. They kind of understand some of those important principles of timing and how to how to work with school nutrition directors. But and then we're kind of toggling back between worksheets and content here, but it is definitely a way to kind of keep wrapping in the content and the materials that are in that solicitation packet. So if you choose, you can just kind of go through a local solicitation and tie in some of these concepts that we are talking about in these slides. Oh, also I want to just point out, so the page 112 of the producer workbook is basically a checklist of what you need to think about when you're meeting with a school nutrition director. So it's a great way, and they don't, you know, producers can use this right before they're actually considering meeting with a school nutrition director, or or getting an understanding and gauging what they need to do to be prepared to have that meeting. So, and then for this final activity, we just want producers to assess how direct to school market channels can address their motivations for selling to schools. So kind of going back to those, those goals that and for their farm business and their operation, and thinking about how producers, how selling to schools can meet the producer goals. And we actually recommend at this point just to have producers break out into small groups and kind of reflecting on the stuff that they've learned up to this point. And we also recommend, if you have a group of diverse producers, some that are doing diverse enterprises, to break them out into different sectors. And you can see a list of those questions on page 24, and you can have those questions written on a board or in your PowerPoint, and they can ask each other, break out into 2 or 3 groups of 2 or 3 producers and go through these questions. Yes, so I did fly through module 2, so I'm just gonna wrap up with showing you all some of the case studies that we've developed based on the topics outlined in module 2. So we have some, food hub distribution case studies, as well as a DoD Fresh folks that from Montana and Wisconsin, and then some state purchasing cooperative case studies with Anthony Youth Farm. And this is that checking for understanding, and that the checklist that producers would go through in module 2 in their action planning page on page 57. And, we want producers, hopefully after you've all have talked about the different marketing channels, so they understand what those channels are, how to work with intermediated and wholesale distributors, having a basic understanding of solicitations and how to communicate with the school district, as well as some of those quality standards and vendor requirements, and just a basic understanding of what schools expect when they are buying local products. And this is another really great opportunity for regionalization. We've been kind of pointing those out, and hopefully in your next breakout session after this particular module, you'll have an opportunity to think about how that can happen within this particular module. So some ideas are identifying existing school purchasing groups or farm to school coordinators, also any kind of incentive programs in your state, and include those as examples. Or bring up a school district website and show how to locate a formal solicitation, or bring up any kind of public solicitation host site such as Market Maker. And then another way to regionalize is including state level requirements for vendors selling to school districts, and really kind of researching that, because there's only actually one state in the United States that requires a GAP certification in order to sell to schools. So that is kind of a common misconception. But what are some of those other certifications that a school district might require? And then indicate any local programs that support school marketing, like we just had Aubrey talking about the Harvest of the Month program. So are there opportunities like that to kind of enter in and meet with school nutrition directors? And these are all NCAT photos from Texas because typically Robert does this. And so he included a bunch of pictures of folks with Hetch chile harvest and a poultry producer and then a grapefruit grower meeting with the school district school nutrition director. So with that, I am going to stop sharing. And yes, so in this region, there is not a state that actually requires GAP certification. So, so that is actually in North Carolina. So, okay, an example of a forward contract. We don't have an example of a forward contract in this particular, in this module, because we're just really trying to get producers oriented towards the solicitation process in general. But Leanne, we definitely, if you have an example of a forward contract, we would definitely encourage you to include that in your training with producers.
Yeah, can I chime in for a sec too, Tammy?
Yeah, absolutely, please do.
You know, I think the technical definition of a forward contract is when, let's say, Andrea School District is looking for beef. I put out my solicitation, and then I order beef in the future. You know, that is the examples of what are included here in this, you know, in the materials. The Durango example is just that. The Minneapolis example is just that. I think they linked to Santa Fe and Albuquerque. The actual contract is often created or generated from the solicitation itself, because that's the document where Andrea's school district says, I'm looking for this type of vendor, I'm looking for this type of product. They just kind of take that and then morph it into a contract. And so there's not really anything special about a forward contract per se. It's quite often the way that schools typically buy products. And I'm happy to talk more about that. You know, feel free to reach out if you have more questions. And I know we've got a time to chat later, Leanne, but in a sense, the examples that are shared here through this producer training, you know, could be, or in a sense are examples of forward contracts in a way.
Great, thank you so much for that clarification, Andrea. That makes a lot of sense.
Can I ask
They just
a
don't
question,
have forward
Tammy?
contract like stamped on them.
Yeah, Aubrey, of course.
I have kind of a simple question, but I'm just a little confused. So with those worksheets, I think they're like 2C, flipping through here, 2B, C, D, etc. So those are in the appendix, whereas all the other worksheets are like in the modules. Is it because they're more optional, or is that deliberately formatted like that?
It's deliberately formatted as like a solicitation packet.
Okay.
So it's really, it's all about the worksheets 2B, C, and D are part of that appendix C, which is a packet, and it's all, those worksheets directly relate to a solicitation. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. And the solicitation packet was so big, it was hard to include it as part of the content and not overwhelm producers. So that's the way we included it that way, for better or for worse. All right. Any other questions before we skirt off into the breakout session?
Alrighty, welcome back everyone. Hopefully that last breakout session today was productive. And as we come to a close for the day, we just wanted to make some space to kind of share some of the excitement that may be buzzing around in your groups, and really just have an opportunity for each state breakout team to share some things that they would like to uplift, just so other state breakout teams can get a sense of what's cooking in your team. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to go down a list of states, and let's just share one program, event, policy, or producer story that should be lifted up in your state. So I know we didn't tell you to assign a representative for each state. So if you're feeling up for it, please just go ahead and come off mute and share an answer to that question for your state. So I'm going to start with Montana.
I will go ahead and share for our team. Some of ours were already included as part of this training. So yay, we had a head start on populating that list. But one in particular, which was shared, is having the local foods in DoD Fresh, the Western Montana Growers Co-op and GRASMIC. It's just a great example of a different avenue and something that producers can think about.
Thank you so much. All right, next we have Wyoming.
Get unmuted here. Well, I guess we have one school district in the state that's really working on doing more farm to school. And he started out with beef. He's now into more produce and doing more scratch cooking in his kitchens at this particular time. And he's had a rather successful, not without its challenges, but what we're hoping to do is I am working with the Department of Education to write a grant, farm to school grant, to actually video him and then have him show us how he started it, how they had to grow, how they had to get extra refrigeration, how his team is actually doing scratch cooking. I think it's once a week. And then, and if we can get this videoed, then we can take that out to other school districts and other producers to show them the example of, how we can make this a statewide program.
Great, thanks for that. All right, next we have Nebraska.
All right, I'll share. So we have a tribal school in Nebraska that a lot of the representatives here work with. It's Omaha Nation, and they're located in Macy, Nebraska, and they've had an outdoor education program for quite a long time, but it took some really big steps this past year. They were able to get 7 acres donated to the school from their tribal farm, and in an incredibly short period of time, they had traditional blue corn growing out there, numerous amounts of produce, and it was directed by really 3 staff members, and they had a lot of students out there, and it was just something really cool to see. They have all the produce, the local Omaha language assigned to it, so there's a cultural element to it as well. And in addition to that, they were also able to build raised bed gardens near to the school, and they have a greenhouse that is about to get up and running too. So that was in terms of ag education, really big success story.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Justin. Sounds great. All right, next we have North Dakota.
When I'm Claire, I work with the Bismarck Public School District in the capital city of North Dakota, and it's the largest school district in the state. Farm to School has been trying to get started for a while. And this year, a group of us were able to grow the program from 1 producer to 7.
Great, thanks for sharing, Carla. And next we have Kansas.
I can go ahead and share from Kansas. I'm Caitlin Stanley. I'm with the Kansas Rural Center. We have a few success stories that we want to highlight, but one of them is actually one of our team members here, Amy Altman from Blue Stem, and the work that they're doing to create their own mercantile to sell things. And Amy, I might let you just come off briefly to talk a little bit more about that since you have that experience.
Sure. We decided as a school that we wanted to help our community, and which in turn helps our students. And our students raise their own beef cattle, and we slaughter them, and then we offer it for purchase from the community. And we've also used that meat, like some of the kickbacks from that. We do all of our concession stands with our beef that is raised by the school. And we have homemade, or not homemade, we have chicken eggs that are from our farm chicken, from our school, from our chickens. And we sell those at our local grocery store. And they make homemade salsa from our greenhouse, and we sell it. And so the students have it. And we also make our own homemade grape jelly. So that's what we've been doing so far.
That sounds great. Thanks for sharing. Next, Missouri.
Hi, I'm going to go ahead and share about, we have had some great success with our Apple Crunch this year. I don't know that our numbers are going to be as high, but we have some new school districts that have joined, and excuse me, I'm sorry. I was a little worried to promote to the newer school districts and how they were going to be, if they were going to be able to access the local apples and that kind of thing. It hasn't been a great year for Missouri, and we were really excited to learn that our DoD Fresh came through and they were able to get a variety of apples, Golden Delicious and Red Delicious and others. And so I guess I feel like as a team, we've really learned more about the DoD Fresh this year. And I was so pleased to see that they were able to access the apples. And we also have tied our Apple Crunch in with our farm to early care and education as well, which I'm working on heavily through our CDC state physical activity and nutrition grant. And so we have a farm to, harvest of the month project with that, and have been sharing that with schools and the ECEs. So thank you.
Great, thanks for sharing, Lisa. And next we have Colorado.
There's so much exciting stuff happening in Colorado. It's so hard to choose. I think maybe because this is personally something I'm working on is House Bill 1132, which is a local food promotion program, which was passed by our legislature a few years ago and then put on hold due to COVID. But our first round of funding went out to 16 child nutrition sponsors, and they are receiving additional funding for the purchase of local Colorado grown, raised, and processed products. And I'm working closely with my colleagues at Nourish Colorado to do that. So we're just thrilled. I think the payments are going out today, fingers crossed.
Great, thanks for sharing. And lastly, South Dakota.
Yeah, so in South Dakota, we really tried to kind of inventory all of the efforts going on across the state There are 2 schools in our state that have geodesic greenhouses. One is Wagner, and one is actually the Farm to School program that I run that works on at Red Cloud, that works on local foods and also like culturally important foods learning. We also talked about local foods initiatives that aren't directly tied to foods, but local foods programs on several of our reservations in the state. And then also there's a note on beef to school that I'm not super familiar with, but is an important note. So if anyone else in South Dakota wants to jump in and speak more to that, feel free. But.
I think just to add, we have like 10 schools that are in the state that we know of that are doing beef to school. So that's something pretty big for us.
Great, thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's great to just hear from all of you at once around what's exciting you. And hopefully we can just build off that momentum in these next 2 days that we have together. So in closing, tomorrow we'll continue to build on the module learning with the deep dives.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Barb has your hand raised.
Oh, I didn't see that. Sorry, Barb. I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was trying to clap for people, so it was my misreaction there.
Oh, no problem. Well, I'm sharing your enthusiasm too.
Okay.
Great. Yeah. So tomorrow we'll just continue the module deep dives, and this will be covering modules 3 and 4. And then of course we'll make plenty of time for you all to break out into your state teams. So please join us again tomorrow and have a good evening. Thanks, everyone.